I've identified three basic ways that melders try to integrate science and faith. The first of these I call the gap approach. Science is not and will never have absolute answers for all possible minutiae. Neither does it approach the broadest of questions with explanations of absolute truth. Science doesn't work that way. As a result, there are gaps in our understanding that science seeks to reduce and that some faithful seek to fill with divine explanations in the meanwhile. There are three fundamental questions that we seek answers to: the origin of different forms of life on Earth, including ourselves, the origin of life itself, and more fundamentally, the origin of the universe. According to fundamentalist theists, this came about through divine power and divine volition. God willed it and it was so. And the why of it all is explained by divine discretion. He did it because he could, or simply because he wanted to. As the omnipotent first cause and meticulous designer of everything, God provides the ultimate why and how for the world around us. In contrast to these purely theist explanations, scientific explanations for these same questions are based on theory and evidence. The origin of the universe resulted from a great expansion about 13.7 billion years ago. The origin of life, or abiogenesis, resulted from molecular developments between 4.4 and 2.7 billion years ago. And life's diversity is explained through evolution, which is ongoing. To non-scientists, science seems to be less concerned with the big questions of why than questions of how, as questions of why are inherently hard questions to answer. Nonetheless, science does provide answers to these bigger questions of why. For example, scientists have discovered that evolution happens because beneficial mutations occur in the population, and dynamic selection pressures filter the course of development through non-random survival and reproduction. Neo-Darwinian theories of both natural and sexual selection provide detailed explanations for why evolution occurs. Life apparently began because the environment was simply right for organic molecules and RNA to form. The broad answer to the question, why is there life, may be as simple as because the environmentally distinct conditions of the early Earth allowed it to happen. It formed because it could. Scientists have only a vague idea of what the stuff of our universe was like before the big expansion, because the evidence is quite obviously hard to obtain so long after the event, and as a result, this remains heavily theoretical. The answer to the great question, why is the universe here, may boil down to this: the universe expanded because it had to. These deep questions of why are philosophical, whether theoretical or theological. And because philosophies are often negotiated in our minds, it is understandable that many have discovered ways to combine theist explanations of why with scientific questions of how and why. This cartoon provides one type of melded explanation for explaining the physical and biological world around us. As science also provides explanations of why, whether specific whys like natural selection or general whys like because it could or had to, Gould's magisteria are seen to overlap. This is, however, a God of the gaps approach, as evidence for scientific explanations of why can gradually erode the need for divine will as explanation, unless, ever more doggedly, divine explanations are retained with faith. So this apportionment approach is inherently risky for the faithful, because science, as a gap filler, can erase the need for God over time, or at least reduce it to where it becomes trivial. Many melders do not follow this gap approach. Instead of negotiating boundaries or claiming domains within gaps of what is known or unknown, they have decided to live with two parallel philosophies and deliberately devalue logical inconsistencies. As part of this duality, they accept scientific standards for that which they can or dare have falsified, ever while retaining their God-required faith for that which must be believed. This is not about gaps, because they deny selected science and selected aspects of religious faith, not on the basis of information, but through a filter of personal tolerance and acceptability. To those of us on the outside, it appears that they're simply cherry-picking whatever aspects of science and faith they want to. For some, the virgin birth is okay. For others, evolution is okay. A different group may accept some findings of archaeology. Others may accept the New Testament, but not the Old. Geologic time as revealed by science may be acceptable to some, but not others. And the same can be said for human evolution. Such an open range of opinions among melders obviously leads to diversification of thought and splintering. More importantly, disagreements have no possible resolution, and truth becomes a personal concept, so it conforms to postmodern arguments regarding truth. Such individualized beliefs need few institutional constraints, and as we shall soon see, they also lack a valid scientific framework of checks and balances. So the gap approach is inherently dangerous for faith because science gradually fills gaps. And the dualistic approach, involving selective acceptance and denial, seems fair on one level, but it is highly subjective and mocks the concept of truth. Is there anything else? I can think of at least one other quite distinct approach that has been advocated by theists, particularly in the US as part of the intelligent design movement. Let's call it fusion. Because the fusion approach involves key aspects of the processes involved, let's review my definitions of faith and science. Religious beliefs are derived from faith in things unseen and unseeable. In contrast, science is based on things seen and reseeable. Science begins with observations that, to a creative mind, could be caused by some vague explanation. This explanation is formally structured as a testable hypothesis that must remain consistent with new observations. Eventually, as hypotheses are refined and evidence builds, a formal theoretical explanation for the phenomenon of interest can be developed. Over time, theory must remain consistent with new evidence, and any disagreements find resolution through further testing of evidence and peer review. Doubt and skepticism are at the core of science, and to be legitimate, science functions irregardless of any individual's personal beliefs. Faith does not share science's dependency on doubt and skepticism. In fact, it is usually viewed as a weakness. Remember, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Doubt is the opposite of assurance. Hope obscures objective reasoning. Conviction is the opposite of skepticism, and empirical evidence is seen. So can beliefs be fused with science? If, in the beginning, there is belief, then initial observations are easily filtered by these beliefs. You just don't see certain things, or even think to look for them. Hypotheses that might explain observation are also filtered by beliefs. You just don't think to pursue certain questions. Testing is invalid because faith-based beliefs cannot be tested or falsified, and they cannot be competitively tested if non-empirical beliefs are in the mix, as beliefs vary freely among individuals. If or when a theory comes about, its acceptability is further filtered according to an individual's beliefs. God-infused science is inconsistent with legitimate science because faith stagnates the pursuit of knowledge. So can faith be fused with science? Not really. While faith may allow it, the scientific approach to explanation most decidedly does not.